Amen, church. It's good to be together this morning. Again, I'm Michael. I'm the campus pastor here. And we are continuing on in our Red Letters series this morning. Has this series been good for anybody else other than me? It's been amazing for me. It's good to see a lot of you here, and just to start to talk about this next verse today. I have to go back to a time when I actually worked for my wife. She wasn't my wife at the time. She was my girlfriend at the time, but I worked for my girlfriend. And I worked for her at this camp, and it was an outdoor ed camp. And what we did at this outdoor ed camp is, like, 3rd through 6th graders would come up, and we would teach them all about the outdoors, teach them all about God, and teach them all about, what was it, breaking their fears? Breaking their fears. That was the big thing. They would break their fears. One of my favorite classes to teach these kids was this survival class. So this survival class, you would get all these 3rd through 6th graders out, and you would teach them what to do if they found themselves in the middle of nowhere with nothing in their hands but some sticks, okay? And so you would get them out here, and my favorite part about it was that you would teach them all about survival, but what it really was a class all about building forts, because we were building shelters, right? So we're just building forts all day with 3rd through 6th graders, and it was super fun. But there was this moment in this class where we would always talk about the importance of building your shelter, building your fort by water. Because we would talk about, hey, if you're going to survive out here, you can last 30 to 40 days without food, technically, but you can't survive for over 2 days without water. And so we would always talk about the importance of, yes, food, but build it close to water because you need a source of water to survive out here. And I'll never forget this one day. This kid raises his hand, 'cause it was kind of a Q&A time, and he raises his hand and says, why do we need to eat food and drink water? And in my head, I was like, that's a pretty existential question for like a 5th grader. And I was like, you know what, this is actually a very scientific question, which I am completely unable to answer because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a science teacher. I'm like a 20-something working for my girlfriend at a camp, right? And so I had no clue what to answer this kid, but in my head I was like, it's kind of like fuel. So I just do I give him the whole analogy of, like food and water for our bodies are like fuel is for a car. It's just, we need it to keep going. And he seemed pretty satisfied with it, and I felt pretty proud of myself because there was nothing scientific about that. It was just an analogy about fuel in our bodies. And then he follows it up with, why do we get hungry? Why do we get thirsty? Like literally asking why our body has physical promptings and urges that make us or provoke us to eat or to drink. And at that point, I'm sitting there like, this is way beyond my pay grade, and I have no clue, and I'm not good at lying twice, okay? So I look at his teacher, and I'm like, well, Mrs. Thompson seems like she might know. She's a science teacher. And so it made me feel so good because she didn't have a great answer for him at all. She didn't really know, even though she was a science teacher. But kids make you think, don't they, with their questions? And it made me think as we came into this verse today that we have appetites, and we take that for granted. We have appetites and we don't even think about it, but God could have created us just to exist off of air and not need food or water. Or God could have created us to where we would never have an urge that would provoke us towards the very thing we need for our survival. We would have had to put something on our calendar to remind us to eat at 8 a.m. and then noon and then 5 p.m. But no, nobody in here needs to set a reminder to tell them to eat or to drink. Your body does that for you, right? It's called our appetite. But the thing about appetites that is so problematic for me is that my appetite tells me that I need to eat, but it doesn't tell me what I need to eat, right? It tells me that I need food, but it doesn't clarify what type of food I need. And the thing that's so frustrating to me about appetites, and I know I'm going to get a witness in here on this one, is my appetite tells me that I need to eat something, and 9 times out of 10, I'm going to reach for something that is not good for me naturally. Is anybody else like that in here? Or is that just me? Does everybody in here just naturally love salad? No, right? We're talking about pizza. We're talking about savory. We're talking about sweet. We're not talking about, there was no salad craving that came out of this question of the day, okay? So I think my first question, God willing, if I get to heaven, will be, why isn't pizza good for you? Because I love pizza and I can eat a medium pizza very easily by myself. No, I naturally have the palate of like a fourth grader. I like chicken nuggets and pizza and quesadillas and tacos. I've learned over time that I need to eat salad, right? But it's this conundrum that my appetite provokes me towards eating food, but 9 times out of 10, I'm going to choose the thing that's not good for me to fulfill this longing that I have within me. This morning, I want to talk about our appetites. Not for food and for drink, but our appetites and our longings to be fulfilled in this life. There is a God-given appetite that is placed in you. There's a God-given longing that he has placed deep within you that longs for fulfillment, that longs for purpose, that longs for significance. You have longings deep within you, but just like my love for pizza and my love for chicken nuggets, so much of the time we reach things that will never truly satisfy us. Would you join me in Matthew 5:6 this morning as we get into this simple passage, but this really challenging passage? There's some passages that you get at the beginning of when you get this passage and you know you're preaching on it, you're not very excited about preaching on it because you just say ouch in your head. This is one of those for me. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount gives this edict to his people to say, this is what it looks like to live in my kingdom. He says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. I'm going to read it one more time. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Will you pray with me really quickly as we just ask God to speak to us through his word? God, we thank you for your word. We thank you for your word even when it's hard. We thank you for your word even when it might have words in it that come with some baggage for us. We thank you for your word, God, because your word doesn't return void. God, we thank you that you create worlds with these words, God. You speak of a kingdom with these words that you've called us to live in as your children. So would you teach us through your word this morning? Holy Spirit, speak to the places that only you can speak to. Change the things that only you can change. Jesus, we're here because you were first here for us. Jesus, we're here because you first loved us. So we praise you. Would you speak to us in this place? And we pray these things in your name. Amen. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. This is one of those verses, if you've grown up around the church at all, it has a couple of words that might come with like 50 to 100 pounds of baggage for you of blessed or blessed and righteousness. And so to talk about what this is this morning, we have to unpack a little bit of what it isn't. And so we'll spend a good amount of time on what righteousness is and what righteousness isn't. But before we get to that, we have to get into these words of hunger and thirst. Jesus is saying, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. He's talking to his followers, and there's a whole lot of people who are there, and you would assume that they're blessed just because they're there, but he's speaking to the multitudes and saying, if you're here and you're hungering and thirsting for righteousness, you're going to be filled, therefore you will be blessed. This word hunger, we're going to get into the original language a bit here. This word hunger is pinao, and it means, wait for it, to be hungry. But more than that, it means to suffer want or to be needy. It means to seek with eager desire. It's not just a hunger of I ate breakfast and now I need lunch. It's I haven't eaten breakfast, lunch, or dinner in 3 or 4 days. I am eager. I need. I want. I am hungering. And this word thirst is dipsao, and it means, wait for it, to thirst. But more specifically, it means to suffer thirst or suffer from thirst. Figuratively, it means to painfully want and eagerly long for. those things by which the soul is refreshed, supported, and strengthened. Blessed are those who eagerly desire, who eagerly long for, who desperately desire. That's what Jesus is saying. This isn't a middle of the road, average hunger and thirst. This is a deep hunger, and this is a deep thirst. And Jesus says, you're blessed if you have that kind of hunger and that kind of thirst. If you have that kind of desperation, if you have that kind of need, then you're blessed. And we have to look at what blessed means. Makarios. Makarios means, wait for it, to be blessed. But more than that, it means happy. But not happy like you and I think of happy, not happy that is contingent upon the circumstances around you, but this deep contentedness that is completely unreliant on the circumstances around you. It's deeply joyful, deeply content, regardless of the circumstances. So if you put these words together, I want you to hear this, and I want you to track with me. Jesus is saying, deeply content are those who eagerly desire the right thing. I need you to hear this morning. Deeply content are those who eagerly desire the right thing, no matter what the circumstances they find themselves in. Is that you this morning? Did you wake up like that on a Sunday morning? Are you sitting in here saying, Michael, I am that person. I am deeply content because I eagerly desire the right things no matter what the circumstances that are going on in my life. If that's you, just raise your hand if you woke up like this. There's one person. I love that. I want to be you. The truth is that so many of us, and I'm the first among us, are not deeply content and are not deeply desiring and deeply and eagerly longing for the right thing regardless of my circumstances. The truth is that my circumstances so often dictate what I want, what I need, what I desire. So often my circumstances dictate what I am eagerly longing for. So I truly believe that Jesus is saying this to his audience then, and the Word of God is saying to us now. I think he knows that we're so prone to long for things that will not last and ultimately will not meet the deepest longings of our soul. You have been created, if you're sitting in these seats, with a deep longing, intrinsically woven into who you are. You have deep longings, and so much of the time we deeply long and deeply desire for things that are temporal and will not fill the deepest longings of our soul. There's a psychologist who got this. If you went to if you've been in a psychology 101 class, you are going to understand this and recognize this guy's name immediately. A psychologist in 1943 named Abraham Maslow penned a paper called A Theory of Human Motivation. And he literally identified our appetites as humans. He identified our longings and he identified our needs. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is anybody familiar with this, Maslow's hierarchy of needs? And it's this idea that if we want to achieve fulfillment, achieve enlightenment, achieve everything that we're meant to achieve as humans, we need some base level things in order to get there, and there's an order to it. He has 4 to 5 different levels of this pyramid, but I'm a preacher, so I condense them to 3 so we can remember them a lot better. Okay, are you ready for this? Everybody say security, belonging, and significance. Let's say it one more time. Security, belonging, and significance. I think there's some genius to this because he's saying at a base level, we long for security and we need security as human beings. And the thought here is I need my basic needs taken care of. Nothing crazy, no great grandiose wants here. This is very, very basic. This is saying I want a roof over my head tonight. I want food in my stomach. I want to have money so I can buy things my family needs. So I need a job, so I need security in that way. I want to be healthy and have my health intact. And I want a safe space for my family. Those are really good things, right? Nobody's arguing with that. Those are base level things that we really do long for, we really do need to find fulfillment in life. I think with each one of these, with security, with belonging, and with significance, I think the problem is not that these aren't needs of ours, but that we place God-like expectations on these needs. I want you to hear this. We place God-like expectations on these needs and these longings for temporal things that will never fully satisfy us. And therefore, these longings or these needs that we have can never truly be fulfilled by the thing that we're longing for. So security, we will never have enough security in anything that we seek it in this world. We will never have enough security. We will never feel safe enough. We will never feel secure enough. We will never feel completely safe from anything that this world can bring our way. And you're reminded of that every single day when you see another shooting go off in some place that feels very close to home for you. And if you had any semblance of safety in your life, in that moment you realize anything could happen at any time. Like hell can come to my doorstep at any time. And it's so funny because we buy things based off of this illusion that we can find security, that we can find our needs met for security in the things we buy. Has anybody ever, we bought one of these. Anybody bought one of these rings? Anybody have one of these? Anybody? Raise your hand if you got a ring. Okay, this is just a camera that's attached to a doorbell, that's attached to your internet, that's attached to your phone. So you can see when people are at your door. And we got this because there's just like a lot of stuff going on in our house. We're like, you know what, we're just going to get this so we can feel more secure. We can feel more safe. The reality is there's so much going on around our house that I get a notification on my phone every 5 seconds about something that's happening. And it's like my phone is crying wolf at me from my pocket. I don't know if there's something actually happening, or if it's a squirrel, or if it's a raccoon, or if it's just somebody, if it's the Amazon guy. I just don't know what's going on. But I bought that thing thinking that I was going to feel more secure. And that's a kind of a ridiculous example. But if we're placing God-like expectations on our need to feel secure, what happens at the end of the day is that we become so obsessed with our own security that we stop seeing our neighbor. We become so obsessed with our own safety and with our own security and with keeping ours safe and secure that we stop welcoming our neighbor in. We weren't meant to place God-like expectations on these needs that we all have. The second need that we all have is belonging. Somebody say belonging. And here's the thought. I need people who I can trust and love and who will trust and love me, and it makes me want things. This need that I have for belonging makes me want things. I want close friendships. I want to be part of community. I want the experience of intimacy. I want to marry someone. I want to have kids. I want to have a church community. Does anybody want these things? Raise your hand if these are things that you want in the world. These are all good things, right? But again, if we place God-like expectations on these things, they will never satisfy us. This promise of marriage that just needs to be debunked in our culture is that one person will make you happy waking up to them for the rest of your life. If you've been married at all, you know it's impossible for this one person to fulfill all of your needs every day for the rest of your life, right? So I talk about this all the time when I do marriage counseling, when I officiate weddings. I say take the God-like expectations off of one another because you're looking to that person to fulfill something in you that they were never created to fulfill in you. Only God was created to fill that place in you, but you're placing this God-like expectation on them. And so what happens is you're longing for them to do this thing that they actually can't do for you. They can't do that for you. Only God can do that for you. And you know what happens when we're longing for them to do that for us? We burn through people. Like we burn through people when we place that expectation on them. We expect them to show up and we're disappointed time and time and time and time and time again until we say, you know what, I don't think God wanted me to be with you, so I'm going to go find the next one. And we place that same expectation on them and we burn through them because we have that expectation on them time and time and time. And nobody can fulfill that. Nobody can do that for you. I think we do this with the church too. We place God-like expectations on the church and on people in the church that this church or this person is going to fulfill the deepest longings of my soul. And I do not minimize any church hurt that any person has in here today, but I know that I've done it. I've placed expectations on the church that should only be on God. I've tried to have longings fulfilled by the church that can only be fulfilled by God. And so we burn through churches and go from church to church to church to church when we place God-like expectations on our longing for belonging. The last one is significance. Let's say significance. And the thought is that my life needs to have an impact. My life needs to matter. My life needs to mean something. Who in here wants a life of significance? Anybody? I know I do. But it makes me want things. It makes me want to go to that school so I can get that job, so that I can get that promotion, so that I can have that influence, so that I can make that impact, so that I can make that money, so that I can provide for my family. And it's really this thing that is placed in front of us where it says, you just need to get the next trophy, right? You just need to get the next thing that's going to validate who you are. You need to get that next thing that's going to tell you that you're good enough. You need to get that next thing that's going to tell you that you're worthy. You need to get that next thing that's going to tell you that you're better than the next person. And when we place God-like expectations on the significance that we long for, we start to forget that God's actually called us to something great in this world, and we just start chasing things that will never truly satisfy us. Like this. This is a fantasy football trophy, just FYI. Not mine. Never won a season in my life. I played for like 10 years. Never won. But Monty Kennedy has won 3 years in a row, it looks like. Could it be that Jesus is saying these appetites that you have, these longings that you have for security, belonging, and significance will never be filled? They will never be filled by the temporal things that we pursue. But he's saying, pursue righteousness, long for righteousness, eagerly desire righteousness, and then you will be filled. Saying, eagerly desire this eternal thing, eagerly desire the things that I have for you, and you will be filled. What's your appetite like here in this morning? What are you longing for? What are you chasing after, hoping that it will bring you the thing that you want so badly? What are you longing after that you're hoping will fill you? And before your eyes glaze over by me saying righteousness over and over and over and over again, let's unpack righteousness. Can I be honest in here? And this isn't rhetorical. Can I be honest in here? Yeah? So this word righteousness, it feels like, at least for me, I bring about 100 pounds of baggage to this word righteousness. Growing up in and around the church, 100 pounds of shame, 100 pounds of that's not me, 100 pounds of I've never been that, or 100 pounds of I've been that before, and whenever I got super prideful about being that. And I just feel like the stigma and stereotype of righteousness within the church is this idea of I am pursuing moral perfection at the cost of everything else. I think this picture of righteousness that I get in my head when I read this verse is having on blinders to everything and everyone around me so that I won't be soiled by the unrighteousness of this world. It's this idea that in order to attain righteousness, I need to become a monk and go move to a monastery and have, years of silence under my belt before I can attain the righteousness that he's talking about here. And to be honest, I have my own baggage of just feeling like, man, with righteousness, you can get it can feel like people are stuck up or judgmental or pretentious or inauthentic. It can feel like people are holier than thou or hypocritical. All the stereotypes that the world might have about the church or Christians, I can also have in my head when I come to this idea of righteousness. But this word, I'm gonna butcher this, but this word righteousness that Jesus uses, dike hasune. And there's 6 different words that come from this one Greek word. There's 6 English words that come from this one Greek word. So we have right, righteous, righteousness, and then we have just, justice, and justification. So much of the time when you think about righteousness, you're thinking about your individual pursuit of God, and it is most definitely that. It's most definitely your vertical, individual pursuit of God, but it's not this moralistic perfection that you're seeking after. It is, I am seeking right relationship and right standing with you, my God. It's living in right standing and right relationship with my God. And can I tell you from experience, and I know we could raise hands in here, there's actually nothing better in the world than the moment that you know you are in right standing and right relationship with your God. There is no better moment in the world than that. It's not this seeking or striving or feeling like you're not enough or you need to be more. It is the most freeing, fulfilling, absolutely perfect place that you can be when you know where you are in right standing and right relationship with your God. And it's out of that right standing that I do the right things, right? It's not doing the right things to get into right standing. This is so elementary for some of you, but I need to be reminded of this day after day after day after day. It's not doing the right things so that I can be in right standing. It's being in right standing so that I do the right things, right? That's the place that it's birthed out of. So it is us doing the right things. Righteousness is me doing what God said to do. And I truly believe in this culture, that is losing currency day after day after day after day of actually just doing the right thing. Because we're becoming way, way, way more pluralistic and just in a sense of just do whatever you want to do and that's fine and I'm not going to judge you, right? Like, let's all do whatever we want to do because we don't want to put anything on anybody. We don't want to judge anybody. We don't want to put anything on anybody. So it's just do what you want to do, and that's cool. But this righteousness that God is talking about is actually doing the right thing out of right standing with Him. So it's vertical, but it's not just vertical. It's not just my solo pursuit. It's our pursuit of one another. It's my pursuit of you and your pursuit of me. He's saying hunger and thirst after this pursuit, not only of me, but of each other. And he's saying it's this idea of righteousness between me and you. It's not just a solo act, but it's an individual pursuit, and it's deeply communal. It's about our right standing with one another. It's about justice being present in our community. So when you think about the hungering and thirsting for righteousness that he's calling us to, it's being in right standing with my God and being in right standing with you. And you start to see it show up in our lives. And again, this is a pretty elementary morning talking about righteousness if you've been around the church. But have you seen it show up in your life lately? Have you seen it showing up in your life lately? I've seen it show up lately in the lives of our people. Last month at the locker room, seeing a young man walking forward with his hand raised saying, I want to enter into a relationship with Jesus for the first time, stepping in to his pursuit of God fully for the first time. We saw it after the first service. If you came early, you saw somebody getting baptized by saying out loud, I want to step in to my pursuit of God and let my community know of my relationship with God, and I want to do that for the first time. I saw it this last Thursday night. We had young adult life groups over at Harambe. We had 50 plus young adults show up and say, I don't want to do life alone. I want to do life in community. I see it in the mornings when I'm doing my life journal that we've all committed to going through and saying, God, show up. Show me what you want me to do today. I see it in guys meeting in groups saying, I want to be held accountable for my appetites for sex and my desire for purity. I see people stepping into this pursuit of righteousness. I see it as we love our city. A lot of you have come up to me and said, talk to me about these Love Our City initiatives. And just to clarify, these aren't initiatives. This is just this is just who we are as a church and how we're showing up in the community. This is our local outreach, Love Our City is. I saw it last Saturday as we showed up with 5,000 pounds 5,000 pounds of fresh produce for families in the neighborhood that might not have the money or access to that kind of fresh produce. I see it week after week after week as we do life in church with people experiencing homelessness in the park. I see it as we're trying to acquire a building that will house emancipated youth that are coming out of the foster system. I see this righteousness that shows up not just between me and God, but between me and you. And coincidentally, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those needs, they start to get met when we all pursue God and pursue each other, right? So God's a holistic God. He's not leaving anybody hanging here just needing all of these basic fundamental needs. No, when we pursue God with everything we are, we pursue each other in righteousness, these fundamental needs start to get met in our lives and we start to be everything that God has called us to be. So I want to encourage you this morning, church, stay connected to those hunger pangs for righteousness. Don't go numb to those. Don't lose that hunger for righteousness. Don't lose that hunger to do the right thing. Don't lose that hunger to love your neighbor the way that God's called you to love your neighbor. So I want to exhort you with that, but I also want to be honest again. Can I be honest again in here? I need to hear you say yes, because I'm about to say something. Okay. Just longing and hungering to do the right thing, that's still not enough for me. It's not enough. It might just be because I'm messed up. But hungering and thirsting for all of these things that I know are great still isn't enough for me. I'm too selfish. I'm too prideful. I'm too greedy. I'm too lazy. I'm too wounded. I'm too afraid. Can I tell you that in my worst moments, I'm not longing for righteousness? Can I tell you that even in my best moments, I'm not always longing for righteousness? So if in my worst moments, I know I'm not longing for the righteousness, for the right thing, and in my best moments, I know that sometimes I'm longing for the right thing, it tells me that simply an appetite for righteousness is not enough. It tells me that an appetite for righteousness is not enough because every appetite or longing that I have, even if they are good, will ultimately end in my destruction because of the enemy's plans for my life and my own appetites and what I will continually go back to over and over and over again. And just to prove it, if I long for the wrong thing and I do the wrong thing, then I'll just get in my shame cycle and feel sorry for myself, and I'll self-medicate, and then I'll say, I can never get out of this. God will never have grace for me in this place if I do the wrong thing. I don't know if you're like me. If I do the right thing, I start to have a party for myself and go on victory laps and say, I'm amazing. I just did the right thing. God just used me. Like, I'm righteous, and I'm amazing. I won't go there right away, but I'll eventually go there if I continue to do the right thing. So that tells me simply my appetite to do the right thing or my longing to do the right thing, just based off of who I am, I will still end up in a place of pride and egocentrism and self-righteousness and looking down on you because you're not doing the right thing. Am I alone in here? No? Got a couple of us? Think about it. The Pharisees longed to do the right thing. For righteous reasons, they loved God. We paint them with this picture that they were just like these jerks who just wanted to judge everybody else. No, they wanted to honor God with their lives. And so they were following the rules that God had laid out. But who are the people that Jesus blasts the most in his Gospels, in every story? It's the Pharisees. So you're like, that's not the way to go. But then just when you think Jesus doesn't love righteousness or he doesn't hold that high of a standard, he says if you've committed adultery in your heart, then you're an adulterer. Or if you've said, I hate my neighbor in my heart, then you're a murderer. So Jesus doesn't hate righteousness. He has a high standard for righteousness. But the Pharisees weren't going about it in the right thing, trying to do the right thing. So it makes me look at the Gospels and say, so who is doing the right thing? Who is longing for the right thing? And it makes me look at blind men on the side of the road as Jesus is passing by who are screaming at the top of their lungs, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Two men who are just saying, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me," not longing for moral superiority, not longing for moral perfection, not longing even for significance, but just longing for Jesus to show up in their lives in some way, shape, or form. I see the woman with the issue of blood who says, if I could just touch the hem of his cloak, if I could just touch the hem of his cloak. This wasn't a longing to be a better person. This wasn't a longing to have more significance or have more influence. This was simply a longing to touch the cloak of Jesus. I look at Zacchaeus, the tax collector, saying, if I could just climb to the top of that tree, maybe I could get Jesus' attention. Not if I could climb to the top of the tree, then I'd be the bomb. If I could climb to the top of the tree, my life would all make sense. No, if I could just climb to the top of the tree and get Jesus' attention. The common denominator between these three stories is just an appetite for Jesus. It's a longing for Jesus. And it makes me realize it's not my appetite for righteousness that will save me. It's my appetite for Jesus that will save me. It's so elementary in here this morning, friends, but it is something that we can't move on from. It's not my appetite to be good or to do good. It's not my appetite for sin. None of that. It's my appetite for Jesus at the end of the day that will save me. It's the only thing that will keep me. Because I can't grow prideful when I'm thirsty for Jesus. I can't grow hardened when I'm hungry for him. Having an appetite for Jesus and cultivating and fostering the appetite for Jesus is the only thing that can keep me. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, our hunger and thirst for righteousness is really just a hunger and thirst for Jesus because he is our righteousness. Because he made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him. If you're longing for Jesus, you're longing for righteousness. But if you're just longing for righteousness, you might not get Jesus. So long for Jesus because he is our righteousness. So I guess I would reframe this and just say, blessed are those who deeply desire and eagerly long for Jesus, for he is our righteousness and they will be filled. Again, it's so elementary and it's so basic, but I need you to hear this, church. We can never move on from that. We can never move on from it. I'll never forget being 16 years old when I met Jesus for the first time. I hated church growing up. I didn't like going to church. I thought it was boring. I thought it was judgmental. I just didn't like it. But I remember at 16 years old, I found myself on my knees on a beach, and I experienced Jesus truly for the first time. I'll just never forget, I was so in love with Jesus at that moment. You know how you I don't know if anybody else has played these games in their head. You ask God to give you a sign. Anybody do this? Ask God to give you a sign? And I was asking God to give me a physical sign, God, I need to know you're real. They're telling me about you. I know you're real. I need to know you're real. And so in my 16-year-old head, I'm I need a sign, God. And so I'm looking up, and this is the cheesiest, but this is how God needed to meet me in this moment, right? I was that cheesy and I believed that cleanly and that purely. I looked up, and the clouds were just all in the sky, but then there was a shape of a heart, and you could see through it to the stars. This is real. This is 16-year-old Michael, okay? This is me being vulnerable. So I'm looking up at worship, and it's all clouds, and I see, that's a heart. This is the sign. And so I thought that was it. I'm there's a heart in the clouds, and I can see the stars. God, I know you see me. 16-year-old Michael, and I'm content, right? And so I go back down to worship. I know you see me. And then even cheesier, I look back up, and the heart is filled in with clouds. And I'm God, you filled my heart with your clouds. I love you. Jesus, I love you. But it was so real to me. It was so real to me. And it's crazy. I was thinking about it this week. I'm 38 years old. I've based the entirety of my life starting at that moment at 16 years old. I started with that one experience for Jesus, started me on a track that I've based everything on beginning in that moment where those cheesy clouds did their cheesy thing, and that just turned my heart to gush and mush for Jesus. But then the reality is for all of us, if you've chosen to follow Jesus, there was probably a moment along the way. But as you get older, it's probably like me, you start to think, well, it's got to be a little more complicated than this. You get educated and you rightly question some of your bad old theology, right? So you start unpacking some of that. But then after a while, you have more questions than you do have answers, or you have more critiques than you have experience. And then you start to doubt and wonder if it's true. And I'll never hate on anybody who's doubting, because that actually means you're taking it seriously. If you've never doubted, that means you haven't really taken this whole thing seriously and thought this thing through. And for me, I'll always have doubts. In my lowest moments, I'll always have doubts. In my highest moments, I'll always have doubts. I'll always have my questions for God. I'll always have my critiques of the church that I love and serve in, Big C Church in general. I'll always have my own sin that I'm navigating and wrestling through. But I've learned at this point in my life that I just can't move on from Jesus. I just can't move on from him. And it gets me emotional because he's that good. And the truest moments of my life are the moments that I've known to the depths of me that he is real, that he knows me, and that he's called me his son. And it's so elementary, and it's the very thing that we can never move on from. I'll get so hardened, I'll get so jaded, I'll become a shell of myself if I ever move on from that. And so my encouragement for you this morning is to never lose your deep hunger for Jesus. Never lose your appetite for Jesus. We can never move on from that. If we're a people who have a deep need for Jesus, we're going to be blessed, content regardless of our circumstances, and we're going to be filled. And we're going to be the people in the church that God has called us to be if we just never move on from that. I want to pray for a couple of you to close this out. We're going to take communion after this, but I just want to pray for you really quick. We're going to take communion and worship, but before we get to that, there's a couple of people in here at least that need a fresh longing for Jesus. That need a fresh, man, I need you. A fresh, I want to experience you. A fresh, I'm hardened or I'm jaded or I've moved on from you or I've forgotten or I felt like this is way too elementary. There's some people in here this morning who just say, I need a fresh longing for you, God. So would you close your eyes with me, and I'm going to pray for you. God, I just thank you for every person in this room. God, I thank you that you are real. I thank you that you know exactly where we are this morning. And I thank you that you've called us to have a hunger and a thirst for you. God, it's our confession that some of us have lost that hunger and thirst for you. Some of us have grown jaded. Some of us have never had it. And so I want to pray for those people in here this morning that say, I just want to say I need Jesus again. In some area of my life, in a relationship in my life, I just need you. I need a fresh longing for you, Jesus. So if that's you this morning, would you just do something courageous for me and just stand up where you are? I want to pray for you just to say, I need a fresh longing for Jesus this morning. Yeah, thank you. I've grown jaded. I've grown so comfortable. I've grown so used to it. I have the answers. Or I used to have the answers. Now all I have is questions. That's you in here this morning. Stand up. Yeah. God, thank you for being so faithful to move. God, I thank you so much for the courage of my brothers and sisters who are standing in this place this morning. God, you meet them exactly where they are. At their point of honesty and their point of need for you, God, you meet them exactly where they are. So Holy Spirit, would you meet them exactly where they are this morning? In all their honesty and all their need for you, would you meet them exactly where they are, God, and remind them how much you love them. Remind them how much you are in love with them and have been pursuing them. Remind them that you are real. Remind them that you are faithful. Remind them that you are trustworthy. Remind them that you are powerful. Remind them this morning, God. So we pray over them. If there's anybody in here this morning that's never experienced Jesus, never trusted Jesus, never claimed Jesus, I wouldn't be doing what God's called me to do without creating an opportunity. So if that's you in here this morning, you're saying, I want to experience Jesus for the first time. I want to follow Jesus for the first time. Will you just have the courage in this moment just to stand up and say, that's me. I want to follow after Jesus. God, we thank you that you're good. We thank you for our brothers and sisters who have stood. Now, God, as we enter into a time of communion and a time of partaking in the broken body and the shed blood of Jesus, God, would you bless this time? In Jesus' name, amen. Can we put our hands together and thank God for those who stood this morning?